a suspension was handed down to a TV anchor from upstate New York after she appeared to be intoxicated during an incoherent live broadcast in July of 2022. Heather Kovar, at the time in her 40s, slurred her speech, abruptly changed topics, and called the meteorologist by the wrong name during the 6 p.m. telecast on July the 9th. 2 days later, WRGB CBS 6 put her reinstatement on hold, pending an investigation. Kovar told the Times Union that it was her grueling work hours combined with grief relating to her personal life that had caused her on-screen flubs, not alcohol. She reportedly notified the station, based in Schenectady, that she wouldn't be renewing her contract a day before the incident. One producer from the station claimed that the woman was often intoxicated on the job. It was unclear if Kovar ever returned to finish her contract, which was supposed to run until July the 31st. Number 30. Catherine L. Macarone. Students from Longview Public Schools in Washington screamed as their inebriated bus driver drove through 3 red lights on September the 12th of 2019. One of the passengers, a young boy, dialed 911 and reported what was happening. He said that he could tell that the driver was intoxicated because she was wobbling and her mouth smelled of alcohol. The 48-year-old driver, Catherine L. Macarone, was heard saying, "I am crazy. I'm totally crazy," when she was arrested. Longview police said that she exuded an obvious odor of intoxicants. There were no students on the bus at the time of the arrest, but Macarone had already finished 2 afternoon routes. A breathalyzer showed that the woman had a .096 BAC, or blood alcohol content, which was twice the legal limit for driving a school bus. Macarone told police that she was taking anxiety and sleep medications because of her ongoing divorce. She was charged with reckless endangerment and driving under the influence. Almost 2 weeks later, she resigned from her post. On November the 14th of 2019 in Cowlitz District Court, she was ordered to attend 5 years of counseling and serve 5 years of probation. Number 29. Sabrina Macri. A civilian noticed a babysitter in Brookhaven, New York, whom she believed was drunk, and prevented her from driving away with 4 children on June the 30th of 2016. 19-year-old Sabrina Macri, who had young boys in her care at the time, had been trying to find her black 2015 Honda Civic in the parking lot of Cedar Beach. She attempted to drive away when she finally found it, but a bystander named Nicole Diaz blocked her path, so she couldn't leave. Suffolk County Police responded at around 2 p.m. Diaz later told CBS that Macri was stumbling and looked confused as she got in her car and tried to drive away. Upon her arrest, she allegedly told officers, "So what if I had a few drinks?" She was charged with driving while intoxicated with a child passenger, 4 counts of child endangerment, and 2 counts of criminal possession of a controlled substance. The next day, during her arraignment, the babysitter, who had a clean record, pleaded not guilty. Her bond was set at $10,500 and an order of protection was issued on behalf of the children involved. Number 28. Charlotte Nichols. On November the 9th of 2021, during a flight from Heathrow to an Armistice Day event in the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar, a member of Parliament was found to be intoxicated. British Labour Party member Charlotte Nichols, along with 2 Scottish National Party MPs, Drew Hendry and David Linden, allegedly drank before and during the British Airways flight. Nichols eventually needed to be placed in a wheelchair due to the severely impairing effects of alcohol she experienced. The politicians became frustrated when their COVID passports didn't work, prompting military staff to intervene to calm them. Linden and Hendry then went to a welcome dinner for the MPs, while Nichols was taken to a hotel for her health and safety. She claimed that her medication had affected her alcohol tolerance. The Defense Secretary, Ben Wallace, wrote a complaint about the 3 MPs to their party leaders. Wallace said that their behavior showed a lack of respect for the enduring work of the armed forces. Ultimately, the Secretary said that their conduct risked undermining respect for Parliament. Wallace's critical assertions were later labeled inaccurate by an SNP spokesperson. Number 27. Claire M. Bucher. Shortly before 2 p.m. on December the 1st of 2017, 25-year-old Claire M. Bucher was reported to be drunk by a school resource officer at Sterling Elementary School in Virginia. The Potomac Falls resident, a second-grade teacher at the school, was found not only to be intoxicated, but also allegedly brought alcohol on school grounds. She was arrested and charged with public intoxication and possession of an alcoholic beverage in a public school during school hours. Bucher was held in custody at the Loudoun County Adult Detention Center. Number 26. Mark McNeil. 60-year-old school bus driver Mark McNeil showed up to work intoxicated 2 days after having a minor accident on February the 7th of 2022. On the day he returned to work after the unspecified accident, McNeil left the depot driving a bus that wasn't assigned to him. A co-worker smelled alcohol on his breath and reported him to their supervisors. The district office subsequently called McNeil on the radio and told him to pull over at a safe location, but he ignored the instruction. One of the supervisors eventually caught up with him in Palm Coast after the driver stopped the bus carrying 40 middle schoolers. He ended up falling to the ground and claimed he couldn't breathe. According to the Flagler County Sheriff, the suspect was very aggressive during the arrest that ensued when law enforcement arrived. McNeil was charged with driving under the influence and child neglect. At the time of his arrest, he had a blood alcohol level of 0.32, which exceeds the legal limit fourfold. He was consequently sentenced to 1.5 years at the Florida State Prison in Bradford County. Number 25. Courtney Upshaw. A newly hired employee for the New Mexico State Parks Division passed out inside her state-issued vehicle while on duty on March the 12th of 2014. Deputies later found 36-year-old Courtney Upshaw of Albuquerque slumped over the steering wheel while parked along County Road 119. Upshaw proceeded to fail her sobriety tests. Officers found prescription medications and a partially consumed pint of Smirnoff vodka in the vehicle. At around noon, she was arrested and booked at the Santa Fe County Jail on a $5,000 bond. 2 hours later, when the state agency found out about the incident, she was promptly terminated. According to the communications director, Upshaw had only been working as a probationary federal grant coordinator since January of that year. Number 24. Mary Elizabeth Sweet. A U.S. Postal Service mail truck was seen driving erratically down Excelsior Boulevard in Minnetonka, Minnesota on the morning of April the 22nd of 2016. At around 11:20 a.m., local police received a report that the vehicle had narrowly avoided hitting another car near Spring Road. The mail truck eventually crashed into a stop sign. Police officers reportedly smelled alcohol on the driver, 59-year-old Mary Elizabeth Sweet. The latter was asked to perform field sobriety tests, which proved unimportant when her BAC registered at 0.297. The woman was then arrested for driving while under the influence of alcohol. The chief of police noted that the observant and quick reaction of the motorist who called 911 had saved lives, including that of the intoxicated driver herself. After spending a weekend in custody, she was released and placed on non-duty status pending the outcome of the investigation. Number 23. Donald Eli. On the afternoon of May the 20th of 2022, a construction worker from Raleigh, North Carolina, was hit by a school bus being driven by a severely impaired driver. Commercial drivers are legally permitted to drive with 0.04% alcohol by volume in the state of North Carolina. 60-year-old Donald Eli had a blood alcohol level of 0.23%. At the time of the incident, 32-year-old Carl Reinhardt was directing traffic at around 10:30 a.m. wearing a reflective vest and holding a stop sign. According to Reinhardt, the school bus initially slowed down as it approached him before it abruptly accelerated and hit him. The force of the impact knocked Carl to the ground. Larry Reinhardt, the victim's father, rushed over to confront Eli, asking if he'd been driving students that day. His question was answered with a "yeah." There were no children on the bus when the collision occurred. Eli told responding officers that he didn't realize he hit someone. He was then given a field sobriety test, failed it, and was arrested. The man was charged with consuming alcohol on a school bus and driving while impaired while operating a commercial vehicle. Eli had reportedly worked as a bus driver for the Wake County Public School System since 2019, but resigned a few days after the incident. According to the arrest warrant, his driver's license had been revoked. The man said that he wasn't able to remember much of what happened, but that he was very upset by his actions. Number 22. William Neves. In Eustis, Florida, someone was picked up by a drunk cabbie shortly before 5 a.m. on December the 9th of 2018. 32-year-old William Neves started speeding and swerving, and when the passenger asked him to slow down, he cranked up the volume of the car radio. Subsequently, the car crashed into a pole. The passenger was able to get out and contact the authorities while the cab driver made off in his car. The police caught up with the suspect at his home near Citrus Avenue after a short pursuit. Neves told officers that he couldn't remember how he got home and that he didn't know about the crash. News Channel 8 in Tampa reported that he was then arrested and charged with leaving the scene of an accident, fleeing and eluding, and driving under the influence with property damage. Number 21. Justin Augustin. In Piqua, Ohio, policeman Justin Augustin asked a fellow officer to meet him at East Ash Street sometime after 7:30 p.m. on October the 27th of 2018. When the man's colleague arrived, Augustin's patrol vehicle was parked beside a flatbed semi-trailer. The 38-year-old admitted to crashing the cruiser while he was trying to urinate. According to a police report, significant damage was found on the passenger side and rear quarter panels of the police vehicle. Augustin was slurring his speech and had bloodshot eyes. According to the responding officer, he was allegedly inebriated while on duty and was brought back to the police station. A body camera captured him being confrontational and uncooperative with his colleagues. When asked if he had a lot to drink, he replied in the affirmative. He was thus arrested and charged with operating a vehicle under the influence. The suspect resigned days later while an internal investigation was underway. On December the 5th of 2018, Augustin pleaded guilty to failure to maintain physical control and misdemeanor possession of a weapon while intoxicated. As part of the deal, the man had other charges dismissed. He was fined $300 and given a jail term of 180 days with all but 3 days suspended. The remaining 3 days were eligible for dismissal provided that Augustin completed a weekend education program and 1 year of community control. Number 20. Daryl Jacobson. On May the 10th of 2013, Daryl Jacobson passed out while working as the infield umpire at a Stark County High School baseball game in Toulon, Illinois. It was during the middle of the first inning when the 49-year-old from Kewanee suddenly collapsed because he was drunk. According to WQAD-TV, he attacked medical personnel as they attempted to assist him. As law enforcement placed him under arrest, he was tasered twice, according to witnesses. Jacobson was put behind bars at the Stark County Jail on 2 felony counts of aggravated battery and 2 misdemeanor counts of resisting a peace officer. 2 days later, during a special hearing, the judge ruled that probable cause was found for all 4 charges. According to the local press, Jacobson said that he was sorry for the inconvenience his actions had caused. He was ordered not to enter any establishment that served alcohol and not to consume alcohol before his arraignment. His bail was set at a reported $5,000. In May of 2014, Jacobson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of resisting a police officer and was sentenced to 2 years of probation. 2 counts of battery were dismissed, but he was fined $1,000. Number 19. Erin Ellerbach. A health and wellness teacher at Jefferson Middle School in Dubuque, Iowa, went to work intoxicated on December the 17th of 2018. School administrators called the police on 38-year-old Erin Ellerbach of Asbury. She smelled of alcohol, had slurred speech, and red, watery eyes. According to an officer, when she took a breathalyzer test, it revealed that her blood alcohol content was 0.224, which exceeds the legal limit to drive. School officials subsequently searched the gym teacher's office and found 3 16-ounce cans of Mike's Hard Strawberry Lemonade, one of which had already been opened. She was arrested and charged with public intoxication. In the fallout, Ellerbach resigned from her position, a district spokesperson told a local radio station. She pleaded guilty in March of 2019. The Dubuque County Court ordered her to pay $60 in court costs and $135 in fines. Number 18. Angela Hirecock. 43-year-old Angela Hirecock was arrested in the city of Des Moines, Iowa, at around 3 p.m. on March the 23rd of 2017. The daycare worker from Winterest showed up drunk to work at LYLE Scholars 2. According to a police report, the school director called Hirecock into her office after noticing that something was off about her. Hirecock admitted that she'd been drinking alcohol from a bottle container throughout the day. A responding police officer noted that the woman had bloodshot, watery eyes and was unable to stand on her own. Her BAC measured at 0.73, which was high enough to warrant hospitalization. She was later taken into custody on charges of child endangerment and public intoxication. She was fired as a result of the incident. On August 31st of 2017, Hirecock pleaded guilty to an aggravated misdemeanor and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, but her judgment was deferred. It was ultimately discovered that she was inebriated while attending her probation proceedings. According to court records, her blood alcohol content was 0.178. At the time she was in court, Hirecock was placed back in custody until her next court appearance. Additionally, she was ordered to undergo a substance abuse evaluation. Number 17. Julianne March. A 49-year-old flight attendant's obvious drunkenness was highlighted by a passenger who tweeted about it while en route to South Bend, Indiana from Chicago in August of 2019. Julianne March slurred some of her words during an in-flight announcement she ultimately couldn't finish. She wasn't able to walk properly, bumping into others in the aisle, and was dropping things on the floor. Upon landing, the Air Wisconsin attendant was arrested. She was charged with misdemeanor public intoxication, facing a possible sentence of up to 6 months in prison. According to court documents, her blood alcohol concentration was 0.204. The legal limit for flight attendants and other aviation professionals was listed as 0.04. March told law enforcement that she already had 2 vodka shots in her system by the time she showed up for work. It was subsequently announced that the woman was no longer employed by the airline. The Federal Aviation Administration conducted further investigation to determine whether the incident was a civil violation. Number 16. Gabriel Lyle Schroeder. A flight scheduled to take off from Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport was cancelled on July the 30th of 2019. Officers from the Transportation Security Administration had seen the pilot, Gabriel Lyle Schroeder, getting out of a screening line for crew members and found him to be suspicious. When TSA agents approached the Delta man, he told them he wasn't ready to be screened and abruptly left the area. After Schroeder was reported to airport police, responding detectives were unable to locate him. The suspect had last been seen in a restroom, where officers found an unopened 60-ounce bottle of Phillips vodka in the trash. Schroeder was later found at the rear of the aircraft, where he admitted to authorities that he'd consumed alcohol 3 days prior. He reportedly denied entering the restroom. When pressed on the issue, the pilot conceded that he might have gone into the bathroom after all, but denied throwing the bottle of liquor away. After being subjected to several sobriety tests, it was determined that Schroeder's BAC was 0.065. He was arrested 20 minutes before the flight's scheduled departure. The 37-year-old eventually confessed to owning the bottle of vodka that was recovered and admitted to fleeing the screening area to dispose of it. In Hennepin County District Court, Schroeder pleaded guilty to a gross misdemeanor count of attempting to operate an aircraft under the influence. He was sentenced to 30 days of electronic home monitoring. A 335-day jail sentence was stayed for 2 years, provided that he followed the stringent guidelines put forth by the judge. Number 15. Ryan Raymond Dashiell. On the night of July the 17th of 2019, Ryan Raymond Dashiell crashed a private plane while trying to land at Mesquite Municipal Airport in Nevada. The 41-year-old pilot from Spokane, Washington, was operating a twin-engine Cessna 550. The FAA later stated that the flight had departed from Pasco, Washington, with its intended destination being the Henderson Executive Airport. The aircraft caught fire in the wake of the crash landing, but firefighters were able to swiftly extinguish the flames. Dashiell survived and was brought to a nearby hospital for treatment. He was then held in custody with a pending initial court appearance. His charge was listed as flying while inebriated. Dashiell had been a certified airline transport pilot since 2011. According to FAA records, he'd previously been convicted of negligent driving and had served 90 days behind bars as punishment. Number 14. United Airlines stewardess. A passenger on a United Airlines flight from Denver, Colorado to Williston, North Dakota, tweeted about a stewardess who was under the influence on May the 3rd of 2018. The unnamed flight attendant had used profanity while going over the safety instructions. She became confrontational towards a passenger, getting within inches of his face as she shouted at him. The passenger, who later took to Twitter, eventually told the pilot about the situation. When the aircraft landed, law enforcement and emergency medical services were waiting. Williston police confirmed that the attendant was intoxicated and turned over the investigation to the FBI. The airline apologized to the passengers affected and refunded their airfare. Number 13. Stephanie Partington. After a 7-hour Emirates flight on April the 23rd of 2012, a flight attendant from Liverpool, England, was arrested. During the flight from Dubai to Birmingham, 24-year-old Stephanie Partington was apparently being loud at the back of the plane, so the cabin manager asked her to quiet down. The routine paperwork she filled out at the end of the flight was reportedly illegible, which caused initial suspicions about her sobriety to be raised. When the aircraft landed, further tests were conducted after she failed a breathalyzer. A blood test revealed that her BAC was 0.164, which was 8 times the limit under aviation law. She was held in custody on charges relating to the Civil Aviation Act. In September of 2012, Partington pleaded guilty to being under the influence of alcohol, which impaired her capacity to act as a crew member. The court heard that the woman who'd only recently joined Emirates was fired. According to court records, she was fined roughly $160. Number 12. Sam Thompson. A male steward on board a Ryanair flight was reported by a passenger for drinking whiskey on duty on May the 18th of 2022. The flight attendant, 26-year-old Sam Thompson, allegedly told the witness not to tell anyone. After sneaking a drink at the rear galley of the plane, Thompson was filled down in Jack Daniels from the trolley before consuming some rosé wine. The flight touched down at London Stansted Airport at about 6 p.m. after departing from Poland, at which point law enforcement tested Thompson. His BAC reportedly read 0.05, so he was arrested and charged with intoxication while performing an aviation function. At his hearing in Chelmsford Magistrates Court on July the 4th, he entered a guilty plea. The presiding judge ordered a pre-sentence report and bailed the defendant until his sentencing hearing. According to Ryanair representatives, Thompson was fired following the incident. Number 11. Theodore Gerstle. On January the 15th of 2018, Kentucky surgeon Theodore Gerstle was arrested after he was allegedly intoxicated prior to a surgery. The man, who was in his early 40s, was scheduled to operate at Baptist Health Lexington around noon when staff were made aware of his impaired state. When confronted by the chief medical officer, Gerstle voluntarily left the hospital on foot. After law enforcement were called, he was arrested on Shady Lane. He was then booked at the Fayette County Jail, charged with public intoxication. According to court records, Gerstle's license to practice medicine in the Commonwealth of Kentucky was placed on probation for 5 years on September the 28th of 2022. Number 10. Darrell James Spearman. Students from Southern High School in Santa Rita, Guam, were instructed to exit their bus after the driver had trouble operating the transmission on the afternoon of May the 3rd of 2023. According to charging documents, Darrell James Spearman had difficulty getting the vehicle out of gear and was bobbing around in his seat before he was told to shut off the engine. A school employee reported Spearman for allegedly being inebriated on the job. When law enforcement arrived, the 48-year-old bus driver was sweating profusely and appeared to be chewing something when there seemingly wasn't anything in his mouth. Officers said that he had red, watery eyes, his speech was slurred, and his hands were moving constantly. When he was given a standardized field sobriety test, he couldn't stand upright without assistance. A 40-ounce hydro flask container was recovered by police. An officer emptied it and discovered a plastic container that had a glass pipe containing dark-colored residue and 2 small bags containing a crystallized substance suspected to be methamphetamine. The school bus driver admitted to owning the flask and was arrested on charges of controlled substance possession within a drug-free school zone and driving while impaired. He was facing up to 7 years behind bars as punishment. When he appeared before a court magistrate the next day, Spearman was released on a personal recognizance bond. KUAM News was told by the Department of Public Works that an internal investigation was underway. Number 9. Donovan Paywa. 22-year-old U.S. Army soldier Donovan Paywa defecated on himself while transporting 9 assault rifles aboard an aircraft at Nashville International Airport on December the 18th of 2021. Paywa consumed 3 mixed drinks at Cafe Vino inside the airport. When staff noticed feces inside the soldier's jeans, they notified airport police. Upon the arrival of officers, Paywa could no longer independently stand up. He was advised that his options were to call someone to pick him up or go to a hospital and sober up or be arrested. He refused assistance and started to curse as he wandered around the terminal. Paywa was then placed under arrest but refused to comply, telling the officers, "Your family is dead." The serviceman was charged with public intoxication and brought to jail. He was released following an 8-hour intoxication hold and his case was later dismissed. Number 8. Sean Spittler. Police arrested a substitute teacher at Kendall Elementary School in Marion, Indiana, for being intoxicated on the job on April the 7th of 2022. Other teachers at the school located on Kem Road raised concerns with school staff after Sean Spittler reportedly showed up drunk. An off-duty Marion police officer serving as a security guard was asked by the school's principal to check on Spittler. The officer allegedly smelled alcohol on the 40-year-old during the welfare check. According to a police report, Spittler exhibited other signs of impairment as well. He was given a portable breath test that indicated his blood alcohol content was higher than 0.1. He was thus charged with public intoxication. The man was taken to Marion Health for medical clearance before he was booked at the Grant County Jail. Number 7. Matthew Karski. A Louisville UPS worker got drunk in the middle of the day while he was dropping off deliveries on November the 12th of 2018. When the man, 43-year-old Matthew Karski, swung by Middletown Elementary School with a delivery, a school staff member noticed he was intoxicated and contacted the police. Upon arrival, officers learned that the suspect had already left. Moments later, a UPS truck was observed speeding and swerving along Old Shelbyville Road. The vehicle was pulled over, whereupon Karski initially denied ever going to the school. However, a passenger confirmed that a package had been dropped off at the school and the delivery man ultimately admitted to consuming a pint of liquor. He blew a .316, which confirmed what officers suspected after noticing his slurred speech and tired expression. A small bottle of whiskey was recovered from his vest pocket, along with other small bottles in his lunchbox, some empty and others half full. According to the arrest report, Karski admitted to being an alcoholic and said he was going through a divorce. He was suspended by UPS with his reinstatement pending the resolution of the investigation. Number 6. Andrew Jackson. On January the 25th of 2017, a man hoping to land an IT management role with the Greater Manchester Police Force drove to his interview inebriated. During the interview at the Sedgley Park Training Center in Prestwich, 48-year-old Andrew Jackson's breath smelled of alcohol as he answered questions. The man was taken into a small office by the interviewer, where the smell apparently intensified. At the end of the interview, the evaluator left the room and informed a police officer of the situation. Considering the obvious smell of liquor on Jackson's breath, the police didn't want him driving home. The applicant was escorted out of the building and given a breathalyzer test. The results show that his BAC was in fact beyond the legal drink-drive limit. He was taken to Bury Police Station where he was tested again. The second result was consistent with the initial findings, so Jackson was charged with driving while intoxicated. The following month at Bury and Rochdale Magistrates Court, Jackson pleaded guilty and had his license suspended for a year. The term would be reduced to 7 months after the completion of a drink driving awareness course. Additionally, he was ordered to pay fines totaling more than $300. Number 5. Philip Maschek. On July the 16th of 2015, a pilot requested clearance to land at Springdale Municipal Airport in northwest Arkansas, but received no response from the controller. It was around 7:45 a.m. when an airport employee found the air traffic controller passed out without a shirt. Police officers arrived at the scene, at which point the controller, 50-year-old Philip Maschek, showed signs of intoxication as he was swaying back and forth. Maschek refused the breathalyzer test but failed a field sobriety test. He was subsequently arrested on suspicion of public intoxication. The city's administrative and financial services director said that the man's actions wouldn't be tolerated. The suspect reportedly resigned from his position within days of the incident. Robinson Aviation and the Federal Aviation Administration investigated the incident along with law enforcement. Maschek didn't appear at his arraignment on August the 17th of 2015, and an arrest warrant was consequently issued, according to the chief clerk of the Springdale District Court. Number 4. Katsutoshi Jitsukawa. 50 minutes before a Japan Airlines flight's scheduled takeoff time on October the 28th of 2018, the co-pilot's blood alcohol level was found to be more than 9 times the legal limit for flying. The man, Katsutoshi Jitsukawa, was due to fly a Boeing aircraft from London to Tokyo with 244 passengers on board. A crew bus driver alerted authorities after smelling alcohol on the pilot's breath. When the 42-year-old was questioned by a security manager, he said he'd consumed 2 bottles of wine and a pitcher of beer the night before, but had already passed an in-house breathalyzer test. He then stated he needed to retrieve his blazer from the aircraft. Jitsukawa was next seen in the lavatory, rinsing and gargling his mouth. When he was given another breath test, it was determined that his BAC was 0.189 according to London's Metropolitan Police. He was arrested and charged with performing an aviation function when his ability was impaired by alcohol. Jitsukawa pleaded guilty at Uxbridge Magistrates Court on November the 1st of the same year. 4 weeks later at Isleworth Crown Court, he was sentenced to 10 months behind bars. The justice said that the prospect of Jitsukawa flying the packed plane in his impaired state was too appalling to contemplate. The airline issued an apology stating that safety was their utmost priority. The incident reportedly prompted the organization to implement immediate changes, which included a new breathalyzer system. Number 3. LYLE Hill. On August the 4th of 2014, a newly hired teacher consumed a combination of orange juice and vodka while en route to her first day of work at Wagner High School in Oklahoma. The school's assistant principal found the individual, LYLE Hill, in an empty classroom with no pants on, ABC News was told. The officer, who subsequently responded, smelled a strong odor of alcohol coming from the 49-year-old's breath. Hill admitted that she'd been drinking before entering the school. She failed all the field sobriety tests conducted by the officer. When asked if she had any additional alcoholic beverages in her possession, she revealed that there were more in her car, which was parked outside the school. Hill was then arrested and charged with public intoxication. According to the Wagner police chief, there was no credible witness to definitively prove that the suspect was under the influence of alcohol when she drove to work, so she didn't face a DUI. During her arraignment the next day, she pleaded not guilty. and later posted bail of $149. Number 2. Michelle Parsley. A convenience store clerk called the East Aurora School District 131 in Illinois about a woman who purchased beer then drove off in a school bus. On November the 15th of 2019, the district's administrator subsequently alerted the company that provides the bus services, First Student. Footage from inside the bus revealed that the driver, Michelle Parsley, was consuming 2 beer cans inside paper bags while 32 children sat in the vehicle. The woman completed her first route of the day before stopping at the store in the 900 block of North Farnsworth Avenue in Aurora. The manager of the bus company contacted the Department of Child and Family Services as well as the Aurora Police Department. Parsley was arrested 10 days later, charged with 2 counts of endangering the life and health of a child. She was later released from custody on a $100 bond. She was fired, and her commercial driver's license was reviewed by the Illinois Secretary of State's office. During a news conference, the chief of police said it was infuriating that someone entrusted with children every day could potentially bring them into this kind of danger. If you missed our video on employees who went after their bosses from last year, then we have that one lined up for you right after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like. Number 1. Car dealership employee. In Fort Myers, Florida, 2 police officers responded to a call about a disorderly employee at a Chevrolet dealership on February the 20th of 2023. The unnamed woman had reportedly arrived to work sober. Later on, however, she got into an argument with her co-workers and appeared to be intoxicated. When she was asked to vacate the premises, she refused and stayed at her workstation. Responding officers tried to get the woman to leave without incident, but she ignored their directions. They subsequently placed her under arrest. She pulled away, yelled and swore as the police detained her. Body cam footage captured her telling other dealership employees that she was going to sue the company. The woman was fired from her job and criminally charged with trespassing, disturbing the peace, and resisting without violence. Number 7. Lloyd Love. On October the 20th of 2022, security guard Lloyd Love was only a few days into his job at American Eagle Protection Services in Aurora, Colorado, when he tried to cash a paycheck of $165. The transaction wouldn't go through because his name had been misspelled as Lloyd K. Love instead of Lloyd C. Love, according to an affidavit. He immediately called Patricia Johnson, who co-owned the firm with her 52-year-old husband Marvin, and demanded a new paycheck. Patricia told him that the initial check had to be accounted for before a new one could be issued. Love traveled to the Raytheon facility where Patricia worked as an outdoor security guard and confronted her. Marvin arrived not long afterwards and tried to resolve the matter, reportedly telling his wife to write a new paycheck. As the conversation unfolded, 35-year-old Love suddenly brandished a handgun and shot Marvin in the face, killing him on the spot. He then fled the scene and called his girlfriend to pick him up, subsequently telling her he'd done something stupid and that the less she knew, the better. Minutes later, a local SWAT team pulled over the couple and took Love into custody. He would later tell detectives that he'd heard a voice in his head controlling him and telling him that Marvin had slept with his girlfriend. The woman told law enforcement that Love had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but that he hadn't been taking his medicine because he didn't like the way it made him feel. Love refused to leave his cell for his first hearing on October the 24th, prompting a Facebook post from Patricia that read, "Devil, your judgment day is coming." Number 6. Sarah Gonzalez McClin. On January the 19th of 2014, the lifeless body of Kansas man Harold Sasko was found on the living room floor of his Lawrence home. He'd been drugged into his submission, his wrists and ankles were zip-tied, and his neck had been slashed so deep that he was nearly decapitated. Sasko's blood was smeared on the walls and used to write the word freedom. At the time, the man was living with 19-year-old Sarah Gonzalez McClin, whom had worked for him at one of the 3 Cece's Pizzas restaurants he owned. The teenager was missing when the police found Sasko's body, as was the man's 2008 Nissan Altima. 6 days after the murder, Gonzalez McClin was found living in the vehicle parked at a campground in Everglades National Park in Dade County, Florida. She was taken into custody and confessed to plunging a knife into Sasko's neck because she wanted to know what it felt like to kill. During the trial that followed, her defense argued that she was not guilty by reason of insanity after a psychologist they'd hired claimed she suffered from multiple personalities. The killing, as per the defense, had been committed by one of Gonzalez McClin's compartmentalized personalities named Elisa. A jury rejected the defense, found the young woman guilty, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison because the killing had been carried out in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. Following a 2021 appeal, her sentence was reduced to 25 years after her lawyer and the prosecution agreed that her counsel had been ineffective during her initial trial. He failed to opt for the battered woman syndrome defense and didn't inform her that a plea deal would have cut her sentence in half. Gonzalez McClin alleged that Sasco would routinely force himself on her while she lived in his home. The victim's family rejected the claim, maintaining that the man had only tried to help her, but accepted the reduction. Number 5. Clarence David Mallory and Carter Carol Cervantes, a resident of the River Ranch Apartments in Fort Worth, Texas, called 911 on November 28th of 2014 to report that there was fire in an apartment above theirs. After extinguishing the blaze, firefighters found the lifeless body of 31-year-old Ashley Harris on her bedroom floor. She'd been bound with duct tape, savagely beaten and strangled to death. There was no sign of robbery or forced entry, and the killer had locked the door behind them. At the time of her murder, Harris was an assistant manager at an American Eagle Outfitters store at Fort Worth's Hulen Mall. Her apartment keys and the keys to the store were missing from her home. One neighbor told the police that they'd earlier spotted a two-door black Infiniti parked at the apartment complex. From that point on, the case unraveled, as it was determined that the vehicle was owned by 25-year-old Carter Cervantes, a former American Eagle Outfitters employee. She'd worked at the store with her boyfriend David Mallory, aged 19, and had been managed by Harris. In August of 2014, a hooded burglar took $18,000 from the store, and Harris pointed to the couple as the likely suspects. The theft case remained open with the police, but the manager's suspicions led to Cervantes and Mallory's termination. The brutal manner in which Harris had been killed suggested that it had been personal, and the police regarded the couple as suspects. As the investigation progressed, Cervantes agreed to speak with detectives. She was given a water bottle, and during a break-in questioning, surveillance cameras caught her wiping it down after drinking from it. She and Mallory were allowed to go home. CCTV footage from the Hulen Mall captured Cervantes trying to break into the American Eagle Outfitters store on the morning of November the 29th with Harris's stolen keys. Unaware that the locks had been changed, a search warrant would provide law enforcement with further evidence that the couple had been behind Harris's killing, partly for revenge but also as a part of a plan to rob the store of its Black Friday earnings. Blood matching Harris's was found on the floor mats of Cervantes' car and on a gun that she owned, likely from her pistol whipping the victim with it. Text messages between her and Mallory revealed that they'd been planning on the heist and murder. Both were charged with capital murder and sentenced to life without parole. Number 4. Jerome Spicer. 31-year-old Jerome Spicer had been working as a trucker for Winners Freight Logistics, based out of the Chicago suburb of Burr Ridge, for about a week in March of 2022. He delivered one load for the company, but there was a disagreement on whether he'd make another delivery, and sources reported he was going to be fired. On March the 22nd, Spicer went to the company's office and shot his boss, Nikola Misovich, with a .40 caliber Glock handgun. 30-year-old Misovich died at the scene. Spicer moved through the building and arrived at a former workplace, Force Logistics, where he shot an unnamed 31-year-old female accountant. She was subsequently taken to Good Samaritan Hospital, where she had surgery for a leg wound and was pronounced to be in stable condition. As later reported by the police, Spicer went to another former workplace and asked for the owner, but left after being told he wasn't available. The man, for whom Spicer had worked for 3 weeks in November of the previous year, later credited leaving for the gym 20 minutes early with saving his life. By the time that Spicer had made his way to another business on Madison Street, law enforcement had set up a perimeter and was closing in on him. When the first officer arrived at his location, Spicer fatally turned the gun on himself. Number 3. Felix Cabrera. 86-year-old Felix Cabrera was known as an easygoing and likable janitor who'd worked for the Sugarcane Growers Cooperative of Florida for roughly 31 years. Leading up to June of 2021, Cabrera learned that he was going to be let go and was reportedly devastated by the news. He'd outlived all his relatives and his life revolved around his job. Cabrera had known about the termination for several weeks and on what was expected to be his last day spoke to his boss, 67-year-old William Combas, at the cooperative's Belle Glade headquarters. The latter told the janitor to clock out that afternoon and never return. Cabrera, a Cuban immigrant who'd been exiled to the US in 1980, was caught by surveillance cameras heading towards Combas's office less than an hour later. He briefly stopped on the way, pulled a handgun from his pocket, and got it ready to fire. Upon reaching the office, he pleaded with his boss to let him keep his job for another year, citing financial difficulties. Combas refused, got out of his chair and started walking towards Cabrera, telling the man to leave his office. In the moments that followed, the janitor brandished the weapon and shot his boss multiple times. Combas was found bleeding by responding law enforcement and later succumbed to his injuries. Cabrera was arrested at the sugar mill and later told investigators that he'd felt disrespected by the way in which Combas had talked to him in front of other employees. He was charged with murder and, as of the latest updates, had been expected to undergo a mental health evaluation. Number 2. Jose Rojas. In April of 2012, Jose Rojas, a computer expert at an insurance adjuster business in Coral Gables, Florida, traveled to his office building carrying what would later be described as a bag of murder tools. It contained duct tape, a wooden mop handle, gloves, and a pellet gun, which he'd bought on his way to work. He lay in wait, placing a dark wool hood over his head and the gloves on his hands. Rojas ambushed his boss, 59-year-old Francis Venezia, and co-worker Robert James when they arrived at the office. He held them at gunpoint and bound their limbs in duct tape, also placing rags on their mouths. Rojas then forced Venezia to call her financial institution and write him a check from her checking account. As she and James started screaming for help, Rojas relentlessly beat them, inflicting fatal blunt force trauma and lacerations. The commotion resulted in law enforcement being alerted and responding officers found Rojas at a supermarket down the street from the offices covered in blood. He admitted to forcing Venezia to write the check and hitting her with the mop handle when she started screaming. Rojas claimed that he didn't remember what happened next aside from seeing pools of blood around the office and on his clothes. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, and attempted armed robbery. Number 1. Fang Lu. Mao Yi-sun and Mi Shi-sun were gunned down along with their sons Titus and Timothy on January the 30th of 2014 at their home in Houston, Texas. All were found in separate bedrooms with gunshot injuries to their heads in an incident that shocked the city's Chinese community. Investigators learned that Mao Yi had previously had an argument with a man by the name of Fang Lu. The latter had asked that Mao Yi, his boss, support him as he tried to transfer to a different department within the oil and gas company, Cameron International Corporation. Lu was angry at Mao Yi, suspecting that he hadn't made the recommendation and instead said derogatory things about him. He noted colleagues started treating him differently. A day after he'd asked for the promotion, Lu told conflicting stories to the authorities about a gun he'd purchased and later returned to a store without a barrel. By the time an arrest warrant was issued, he'd already traveled back to his native China. Subsequent DNA analysis confirmed his presence at the Sun crime scene, but law enforcement feared they'd never make the arrest. On September the 11th of 2022, over 8 years after the Sun family murders, Lu was taken into custody only minutes after arriving in San Francisco from China. One member of the community representative Houston Chinese Alliance claimed that the arrest opened up further questions, including if Lu had returned to the US before or why he'd taken the risk of coming back in the first place. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a beer at work or cocktails on a beach vacation? Let us know in the comments section below.